All right. Good to see you guys. Yeah. You. What's next question? Next question.
Excuse me, sir. Can you confirm that your representatives have had some sort of interaction with the Green Bay Packers in regards to an oncoming contract here in the near future?
Yeah, can confirm. My reps have been talking with the Packers, but to be fair, they've called everyone in the entire kind of American Midwest to play the position of wide receiver. I mean, I don't know. I've kind of just kept an eye on them over the past couple. They called my buddy the other day. He didn't sign with him. They called me. We're still kind of talking about it. Like they've called everyone. It doesn't seem like anyone kind of wants to go there. But I mean, we're just kind of we're in a wait and see kind of game, right now.
And what kind of impact do you expect to have on an Aaron Rodgers led offense that has struggled greatly this season?
Well, truth be told, I'm expecting to have probably the same impact as some of the guys that are already in here. Coming here, kind of work hard, nose to the grindstone. Young player who's not familiar with him. He's probably just going to scream at me a lot, and then I would bet probably blame me for something at some point. Probably some game I don't even play in. And I'm willing to be kind of that sounding board for him to kind of get those frustrations out, like he tends to. It seems like he tends to do with a lot of the young fellas.
And where do you expect to be moving forward? Do you expect to remain with the team long term?
Probably not this off season. I'll probably go back and work over at the Yippee Hut. I mean, most of the Green Bay receivers already kind of work over there. So like I was talking to good old Randall the other day, and then the young guy Watson. I think yeah, they're already kind of planning for their post playing careers because they're just as it is right now. It's just kind of it's an interesting situation. So they're just trying to make sure they're prepared for all eventualities. Whether Aaron decides to if maybe he's got a good comeback this year, or maybe he just quits entirely and goes and smokes some of that ayahuasca Haskell stuff, whatever that all the exotic things. So hey, but that's all the time that I got for you guys. Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for coming out today. Okay. Oh, hey, sorry, I didn't realize you guys were here. I rented out the office area for something. Did they have another press conference in here? Dang it. Oh. Alright, well, if I had a nickel for every time that's happened, I'd have two nickels, but I mean, it's weird that it happened twice. Okay. So, you guys have come back here for another crispy iteration. Actually, I don't need these. What am I doing? Another crispy iteration of the Hannibal Dynasty League power rankings. Ooh, boy. And this one could be a long one. We'll have to see. We already started with an interesting bit. I didn't know that's what they're going to use the office for, but so we'll stick to format as we've done it to this point. 12-1. I'll tell you ahead of time, as I put in the chat. It's not quite as many huge movers this time. I think we had 8 teams last time go up or down 3 spots, and this time we only have 4. So as the league is kind of settled and we're getting into a groove of what teams are really capable of, we're coming to more of a place of understanding where everyone vaguely should kind of be slotted. So towards the end, we'll have a little bit of a recap, start looking ahead to the playoffs as we're coming down, and playoff seeding is going to start to matter here pretty soon. Recap of some of the big trades we've had. We had quite a few. I think we had 7 or 8 trades, something like that, in this window, this kind of second quarter window. So, and then we'll go over a couple of like quarterly stats again. So to kick it off, and let me just reveal them here. We'll get the divisions up here for you guys to see, so you can kind of get a sense of what your division's looking like here at the current time. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to start at number 12. And I'm going to try to do this for just long enough for there to be a frame of it so that the YouTube little thumbnails can catch it, and then I can make an easier timestamp. Cool? 12. I know it's probably backwards for you guys, but number 12, and truth be told, maybe one of the easier picks of maybe one of the easier picks of this, as we've been told straight from the horse's mouth that that this is a tanking sort of team, and that's Steven. Sorry, Steven, I hate to do it to you. Sitting at 1-8 on the season, moving down 3 spots from first quarter power rankings, but I've heard it. The committee themselves, they tell me that they heard it through the grapevine that this team is tanking for next season. It's a bold strategy, and we have seen Steven adding big picks as recently as today, closing in on the trade deadline. But 0-5 since the last power rankings, shipping out a premier running back today, Dalvin Cook, for some future assets. That's the start of the tank. Even seeing like starting Tyler Algier, Curtis Samuel in some key spots, which are fine players, but not necessarily people you want to have in your starting lineup on a consistent basis. Although Samuel's having a solid year. And then the big sadness for Steven, which for me in real life, not at all sad about, as he is a Steeler. But Najee Harris he does not have it in the second season. He doesn't have it. And the report coming out lately has been that he's going to start to see even fewer touches than he has to this point. So, not great for Najee so far. And, at bare minimum, Steven knows when to abandon ship, and he's already looking ahead to next year. If we want to take just a glance ahead, and that's what we're going to do for some of these teams, start to look, now that we're getting into the later part of the year, we're going to start taking a look at kind of the situation going into next year. Picks that we have, kind of some of these young assets and everything. Steven now has 2 first-rounders next year, his second rounder, and 2/3. So Steven actually has 6 picks next year, assuming that I know how to do math. But some potential next year, especially with a very offensively loaded draft up towards the top. We could see some big picks, especially because it's not all quarterbacks. There are some stud quarterbacks in this next one, but not all. A couple of other little kind of flex and skill position options up there. So, and still has most of his picks going forward. Still has all of his picks in 2024 and 2025. So there's some potential here in the future, and even some talent here still on the roster. Maybe if Desmond Ridder becomes the starter in Atlanta at some point, still has Drake London on this roster. Who knows what Kadarius Toney could be with Patrick Mahomes? We still have to see. So, not too much else to say there. Moving on to number 11 for the YouTube thumbnail. We're looking at the young tissue bandit himself, Colton. Sitting at 2-7. Moving down 1 spot from where he was before. Also 0-5 during this kind of this middle portion of the season since our last one. But he was at least over 100 in every game since week 9. He did add even more first-round picks than he already had, thanks to the Aaron Jones / Devontae Smith trade, to bring his total up to 9. 9 first-rounders in the next 3 years. That's excessive. That's a lot. That's building for the future in Dynasty. Even today, kind of flipping assets around the Gabe Davis for Cordero Patterson trade, which I actually really like for both teams. I think, and we'll get into it more a little bit later, I like the deal for Brad, kind of making a big move for a talented running back, even though he's a little bit older, but it shows Brad's kind of like going for it this year. And Colton, he knew that Patterson's a bit of an older guy, so he's shipping off an asset that is still valuable for a younger player who's maybe not had as good of a year as he would have hoped. So I like that trade on both sides, and it kind of shows the direction that both teams are going in. But still lots of young talent on this roster that could eventually come to fruition. Dameon Pierce has already been the stud that he was supposed to be. At the very beginning, people were a bit worried, and then he hit like a hammer. He is already like at least RB2 level, even as bad as Houston has been. DJ Moore has obviously not had the year that he's wanted, especially with Carolina cycling quarterbacks in and out. But, he had the huge bomb touchdown against Atlanta that wound up should have been the game-winning touchdown if he wasn't a goober that took off his helmet. But I'm also not going to totally blame him for that because that really wasn't something that should have been a flag. So, but Moore, still very young, still was on record this offseason as teams were calling in about him offering first-round picks. Carolina keeping him, but we're going to have to see if that changes over time. Kyle Pitts, I just don't understand it. Like, what the weenies is Atlanta doing? I understand you brought in Marcus Mariota, and he can run the rock all over the place. You have the premier young tight end in the game of football. And you're like, you know what? We gotta scheme these other guys open. We gotta find a way to make sure that Mariota only throws like 13 passes a game, okay? We gotta make sure we run the ball at least 62 times. For just to be safe, let's say 65 times, okay? I just don't get it. They have talent on the outside. They have Drake London, they have Kyle Pitts, and they're saying, nope, to heck with that. Now, I don't expect that to continue. I don't know if Arthur Smith's going to be around for very long, but if he is, I'm expecting. The tough part is that they're winning, but I'm expecting Atlanta to make a move for a quarterback at the top of this next draft because Mariota's not the future. So we'll have to see. Even Jerry Jeudy with the right QB could still be a really valuable asset. Obviously, the heartbreaker to Colton was the injury to Breece Hall. Now Gabe Davis on the team, and even one of Colton's new loves, and I enjoy him, is Romeo Doubs in Green Bay. As soon as literally any other quarterback is kind of in the helm there, so the future is very bright for this team. Maybe just not the immediate future, but there's going to be a window here. All right, moving to number 10, and again, if these are backwards, sorry about you. This is just to have things on YouTube. Number 10, moving up 3 spots from the original power rankings. Get off my screen, you notification. Corey moving up to number 9, sitting at 2-7 on the season. And while he still has not maybe had the results he's wanted, I had to bump him a bit for just respect in the willingness to completely flip his entire roster over to CJ. And they both looked at each other's teams and just said, you know what, I want your guys. And that takes some gumption to just say, you know what, cut and bait on my whole team. All right, we're gonna ship it out. And it was costly because Corey wound up giving, I think, a first, 2 seconds, 2/3 in that trade. So he gave up a lot of assets. He got some good stuff in return. So we'll have to see. It does seem like an issue of a team that's kind of had some bad luck. Injuries here and there. Has maybe had a couple of trades that just didn't turn out at all the way that it was expected. So I think this team, when healthy and when properly performing, is better than 2-7. But we're gonna have to see moving forward. He did have 2 more wins in this window than he had in the beginning of the season when he started 0-4. He also had 115 points or more in 3 of his past 4 games, which shows that maybe the roster is starting to get into like a bit of a turnaround that maybe can be a springboard going into next season. Because this season probably done. The tough part, because some of these trades have not worked out well at all in Corey's favor, this team does not have, at least at the time when I had originally written this, may not be true. Let me take a gander. I just want to make sure that my facts are straight. Yes, this team does not have a first-round pick until 2026. That one is rough. And with kind of the issues with some of these trades where the assets, their value has now depreciated, it's a little tough to see where that value can get recouped. It's not impossible, but it's going to take some savvy GMing from Corey to be able to kind of turn that one around. The bright side, there is still talent here. It's not that this roster is devoid of talent. Josh Allen is still absolutely a cornerstone piece. Jonathan Taylor is too good to not turn it around. At some point, this offensive line will get fixed, or they will get in a much more competent quarterback in that position. Is that going to be with Jeff Saturday as the new head coach? My bet is no. I would doubt that he's going to be around. I like Jeff Saturday. I don't know that you go from TV analyst. I mean, really the only time we've seen this was with the Raiders hiring Mike Mayock, but that wasn't his coach. That was as a GM. Now, Jeff Saturday is the on-the-field head coach and had to immediately, in a span of like a couple days, figure out like who his play caller is going to be, figure out if he's like changing the system or just saying, hey, what are you guys running? Let me just try to kind of hang on to that. He had to do all of this immediately. It's so strange to me, like elevating or having an interim head coach who's not just someone already on the staff but it's also not even involved with the actual game right now outside of the media. I don't understand it. I hope he does well. I like Jeff Saturday. I just don't understand the hire. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But Devontae Adams should still have several years left of his prime, and George Kittle still has the juice if San Francisco can tweak their offense with Lance next year to be what they are hoping it to be. Because George Kittle's just, I don't know. He's just too good. He's too good. I mean, Travis Kelce still says George Kittle is the best tight end in football. I would disagree because I'd say it's Travis Kelce, but, he's too good. So I expect them to get that figured out at some point. So there's potential, but this roster does need help to get it to where it needs to go. All right. No, I'm sorry. I've skipped one. That was number 9. Wow, I suck. I'm not gonna re-record all of this. So we're not going back one. We're going back, and I'm gonna have to do messed up timestamps. All right, that was number 9. Number 10 is actually, whoops. Number 10 is Sunshine. Sorry, Sunshine, that I skipped over you. I was typing this for a while, and I'm very tired, and I just missed it. Sunshine, 3-6 on the season, moving down 2 spots from where he was in the first power rankings. 1-4 during this stretch. A very rough week in week 6 with only 60 points. But this team is also being a bit sneaky, adding some future value. Sunshine has 2 first-round picks next year, and 3 of them in 2024. A lot of future assets there. Derrick Henry and Dallas Goedert are the anchors of this team, but we're in that phase of starting to question how many more good years Derrick Henry has. He's still a stud, but he's also getting closer to 30. And as we know with running backs, the closer they get to 30, the more, even if they're still productive, the more likely a team is just to drop them entirely. So he's also been testing the waters a bit with a few peeks at some trades and has one very interesting wild card on the roster in Calvin Ridley, who after the trade now of Ridley to Jacksonville, and Ridley will be, reinstated next year from his ridiculously stupid suspension, but that team becomes very interesting. Trevor Lawrence is still not what people have expected of him, but he has improved in year 2. He hasn't taken like the gigantic leap. I want to say the Burrow leap. Other guys have taken that leap, the Mahomes leap, anything in that stratosphere. He hasn't done that, but he has improved in some ways. And they have a good number 1 right now, Christian Kirk, who's probably more of a number 2. So Ridley, Kirk, ETN in the backfield, keep an eye out on that team. That might be a good dynasty asset for Sunshine to have going forward. So, all right. Then Corey was number 9. So I'm going to have to make sure I get the timestamps right on that. Corey, good on you. Number 9, moved up 3 spots. Number 8. Hello, camera. 8. Shockingly, not number 1 as my wife expected. I can't talk. But she is at number 8. 3-6 on the season, and she has moved up 3 spots from where she was in the first power rankings. 3 straight losses to start this window of games. 1 fairly unlucky. She did score 130 plus, but it was against me. So it's a bit of unlucky when you can score that high and not win the game. So, but then back-to-back wins in both of the past 2 weeks, including one over the 6-3 Michael, who we'll get to later because he's cute. Weirdly, from around the league, as I'm talking to people, kind of getting a chatter from a handful of individuals, Sarhea's roster is the one that I get the vibe that a lot of other teams are looking at to kind of pick from and trade with, because while she may not necessarily have a lot of blue chippers, she does have a lot of very solid replacement level players who can fill in on a bye or for someone who's injured in a lot of different spots. David Montgomery, Kenyon Drake, Rondale Moore was there until I traded for him. Josh Palmer, Darnell Mooney, who is a rising asset for sure. Tony Pollard. Like a lot of very good replacement level pieces that maybe would not cost you an arm and a leg. So I've gotten a sense that a lot of people are kind of looking at her roster. The only real true blue chip player on this roster is Saquon, who sources tell me and tell the committee is untouchable. So don't try to trade for Saquon. Unless you're trading absolutely everything. Sarhea has also not messed around much with draft pick trading. She is missing her first rounder next year. Otherwise, she has every other pick for the next 3 years, and she has no one else's picks. So, has not messed in the draft pick trading realm whatsoever. So, we'll have to see. There is a lack of upper echelon talent on this roster. And so we'll have to see if that's something that gets addressed in the draft, if it's something that she decides to package some picks and some players to kind of make a big, bold move at some point. So we'll have to see. There's some potential here, but the ceiling, as this roster is currently constructed, the ceiling is not super high. Okay, number 7. Sevhan is CJ, who sadly is the only person on the rankings who has not moved up or down from his previous spot. 4-5 on the season. The giant roster turnover trade between him and Corey still left CJ about where he was before. He was 2-2 in the first rankings in this most recent set of games. Since then, he's been 2-3. But he also came out of it with an extra first rounder, and I think 2 extra seconds and 2 extra thirds. So a lot of extra value coming to him out of that. This is a roster full of young players who have not taken the leap that they were expected to, for various reasons, some of them having nothing to do with the player. Michael Pittman, Dawson Knox, Devontae Smith, Cam Akers, Chase Claypool, young guys who are still talented and who are still valuable to a degree, but for various reasons, be it injury, be it poor quarterback play, be it just a bad team situation, be it, like in Devontae Smith's case, your team traded for a true ace number 1 receiver, so your targets just aren't quite as prevalent anymore. All of them have not quite found the success people expected them to take. Still, some very good, middle high-ish level talent here. Dak, Aaron Jones, DeAndre Hopkins, even Raheem Mostert in some of these games, who has been a situationally very good player playing for Miami, and their running back situation has had quite a bit of turnover. A few interesting young pieces moving forward. CJ does have Justin Fields still on his taxi squad, interestingly, but does have Justin Fields, who past month or so is ascending, if you're keeping an eye on him. And then Jamison Williams, who still hasn't played yet for Detroit, but may see looks later in the season. I think the last report was from 2 weeks ago. He was still probably a month away. So late in this season, he might start to see looks for an offense that it currently is a lot better than people expected to be with Jared Goff. So we'll see if that becomes another good piece to perhaps take a look at for the future. But CJ has 11 picks in the next 3 years, but only 2 of them are his because he's made so many trades. And only 1 of them is a first rounder. So we'll see what kind of GM CJ is going forward, and what kind of talent he can get with some of these later picks, or if he can package them into perhaps higher picks. All right, to number 6, we are looking at the one big free faller of this set of power rankings, and that is sadly our dearly beloved Jake, who is sitting at 5-4 on the season. Moved down 4 spots from where he was before. The big faller. Still a solid team, not a bad team. Still a solid team by most metrics. Currently still leading his division by 2 games, which, as the way our playoffs are set up, still in a guaranteed playoff spot as a division winner. But after the 3-1 start to the year, he lost the next 3 straight and scored under 90 points in each of those games. We all kind of fell for the early ruse of the early season explosion of Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, it's not entirely St. Brown's fault. He got hurt. And it's been a little rough since he's came back. In his last 4 games, he's only reached double digits points 1 time. But you chalk some of that up to injury recovery just a little bit, because in the past 2 games, he's been on the field for 95% of the snaps, and he's got 19 targets. Not a small number by any means. So we'll have to see if St. Brown kind of rounds back into form to become, the people were expecting him to have, a Cooper Cup type season and be the guy who comes out of nowhere. But TJ Hawkinson, already a strong contributor on this team, but may have gotten even more valuable getting traded to Minnesota. Had a great first game with them. A fantastic trade for the Vikings, as they're kind of, actually, weirdly, kind of mirroring Ryne's trade from today, but we're going to get into that later. All right. One of the big disappointments for Jake, the injuries that have kept Keenan Allen off the field. Only healthy for 2 games so far this year. It's been rough. He's been able to make it by with St. Brown from, here and there, with DK Metcalf, who still had a solid year with Geno. I think people expected a decline from Metcalf, but still has been, like maybe a low wide receiver 2, but still solid. One of the gems, though, and I wanted to pry this one away from him because I had a feel for it before the season. I wanted to pry him away, but Ramondre Stevenson, a true gem this year. 19 or more points in 5 of his past 7 games, and is currently running back 8 in all of fantasy on an offense that can't even figure out who the heck to start at quarterback and how to make them not throw the ball to the other team. He's still running back 8 in that offense. Imagine what would happen if Mac Jones or Bailey Zappi can figure out how to run that offense and just regain the form that they've, each of them has had in weird little spurts. Just imagine. But Michael Thomas missing the rest of the season for Jake's team, also sad after missing all of last year. Now he's missed the rest of this year, all last year with toe and foot injuries. I don't want to take the joke from social media, but Brian Robinson got shot and only missed 4 games. But who am I to judge? You do you, Michael Thomas. So you have a good rehab. I'm hoping. I mean, he's a talented guy. I'm hoping for a lot from him. As far as picks going forward, Jake has gotten into draft pick trading in no way, shape, or form. He has each of his 3 picks in each of the next 3 years and no one else's picks. So he has not messed with draft pick trading at all. All right, up to number 5. And moving down 1 spot from the previous rankings is Michael, sitting at 6-3. 3-2 during this 5-game period since the last power rankings. But this team has not quite reached the lofty heights that it did early on in the season. 2 games in the first quarter of the year with over 150 points had us thinking the ceiling was going to be crazy high. But in the past 5 games, no games over 135 and only 1 game over 120. So coming back down to earth just a little bit. Back-to-back losses in the past 2 weeks knock him down just 1 spot from where he was before. And while Josh Jacobs has still continued his freaking absolutely torrid pace, another 2 30-point games in these past 5 weeks, he's still in search of a strong running back 2. He's got options: Khalil Herbert, Melvin Gordon, Darrell Henderson, James Cook. None really a consistent good RB2. Khalil Herbert probably being the best of that bunch. Receiver still a strength on this roster. Tyreek is the best receiver in all of fantasy by there's kind of just like this little niche up at the top of like him and Cooper Kupp, and then like everyone else just kind of falls after. Tyreek's been a revelation in Miami, as I think people expected him to be. Maybe not quite at this height, but dude's on pace for 2,000 yards. So still an absolute strength there. Tyler Lockett, a top 10 receiver this year, which has been very, very good for his roster. Debo is not playing quite up to the par that he did last year, but I mean, we've seen the offense shift a little bit to not really focus on him as much. We knew he was going to lose touches with McCaffrey coming in because they're both such like Swiss Army knife type players. So, but still all kinds of talent all over the place here, even tight end, like a top 5 tight end in Zach Ertz. So a lot of talent still here. Still a team that is fighting in a very tough Hoenn division, the most hotly contested division in the league, but definitely a team that's probably going to be there in contention for the playoffs at the end. Going to be fighting for one of these in one of these early round playoff spots. Moving up to number 4, moving up 2 spots from his previous ranking, Brad, now at 6-3, had kind of a middling start. at 2-2, but has now come roaring back. 4-1 in his past 5 games, with games of 138 and 142 in that stretch. And now, as it looked early like Ryne might kind of run away with that division a little bit, Brad now pushing Ryne for that division. I think only a game behind as it stands right now. As we're getting closer here into the postseason, a surprise career year for Miles Sanders has continued and has given Brad a very strong 1-2 punch at running back with Sanders and Christian McCaffrey, whose value only went up going to San Francisco and Kyle Shanahan's run scheme. A.J. Brown has been better than expected and become Brad's true number 1 receiver because he has exploded in Philly for the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles. And while Brad continued, even still as of late, to doubt my Juju will get 1,000 yards this season prediction, barring injury, Juju is currently on pace as Brad's receiver 2 for over 1,200 yards, looking very strong on this roster. So the Swami speaks again. I have spoken it into existence. Now, one of the sore spots of this roster, Tom Brady has not been the stud at QB that would have been hoped, but Brad was smart. Brad was smart to look for points in other areas. A deadline deal today with Colton for Cordero Patterson, which I said earlier, I liked the deal for both sides. Now, while Brad is giving up a younger asset, it was, Gabe Davis maybe wasn't having the year he was hoping for, especially now with the Josh Allen injury is maybe a little bit iffy, but still a talented young guy. But Patterson, if you look just, you hit on his tab and you're like, oh, he's like running back 33 or something. But he also missed a month. In the handful of games he did play, he scored 5 touchdowns. I think on a per-game basis, he's running back 10. So he's still an RB1. And that offense still continues to run the ball constantly, still gets to play against Carolina, who absolutely just got demolished by Cincinnati and Joe Mixon. So I like the trade. I think it's a good, aggressive move. We saw it from 2 different teams today, making an aggressive pre-deadline move for a running back to add value to their starting lineup. I really liked the trade. I don't think he gave up, crazy amount. I think it was a good deal. The rookie receivers on this roster all have shown a lot of promise. Garrett Wilson, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jahan Dotson. All 3 in different kind of stretches of the season. Wilson probably obviously being the best of the bunch, but all 3 of them have shown flashes from time to time, especially with Wan'Dale and with Jahan Dotson. The quarterback situation is kind of going to be that's kind of going to be the question mark there. If Daniel Jones stays around, if what's the Carson Wentz, Taylor Heineke situation, I don't think any of those guys are the long-term answer. The Giants are literally like, if they had a top-tier quarterback, they legit might be the Super Bowl favorites. Like, I don't want to take, it's not a shot at Kansas City, it's not a shot at Buffalo, but New York's roster is very good. And if they can get a quarterback, look out Wan'Dale. That might be a stud pick right there. My notes have refreshed themselves. Brad also has 2 first-round picks next year. The one big knock on him, and this will be something that we'll talk about with a couple of these top teams. The fewest points against by a decent margin, although it really has only come into play once in a big way in his Week 6 win over Sunshine, where Brad only scored, I think, 98 points. Other than that, in the weeks where people haven't scored much on him, he has still had strong performances. But the margin is significant. For context, the difference in points against between Brad and me, who is right there, essentially almost tied with Steven at the top for most points against, is an average of 37 points per game. Brad has 37 points fewer scored against him per game than Steven and I do. That's rough stuff. But there's a lot to like on this roster. I like the Patterson move going forward. And yeah, so wow, this is going to be long again. This is somehow going to be longer than last time. Number 3, and moving up 2 spots from his previous ranking. And I like a move from this team too. Ryne, sitting at 7-2 and leading his division. 4-1 in this window of games. 4 of 5 games over 120, including 1 banger just shy of 180 points. an interesting conundrum at quarterback. Two guys that everyone loves to crap on this year, in Kirk Cousins and Trevor Lawrence. But both are productive fantasy quarterbacks. And shout out for Ryne and the Vikings. Kirk takes a little bit too much crap. Kirk's a good quarterback. I love the move for Dalvin Cook. I absolutely love it. Ryne, I think, knew he needed just a little bit of a boost of higher tier talent to make a deep playoff run. And now he has a vicious 1-2 combo at running back with Kamara and with Dalvin Cook. I love the trade. Still a great receiver tandem, Stephon Diggs and Mike Evans. It feels like a lot of the real high-end receiver talent is clustered on teams. There's not a lot of like this one guy's here, this one guy's here. It seems like there's probably like 4 teams that have multiple top 10 guys, which is just, it's interesting to see how that has kind of shaken out. Trading away Kittle looked worse, I think, for Ryne, with Schultz not playing well and getting hurt. But now that Dak is back, and Schultz has 11 catches on 12 targets in his past 2 games, he may kind of be rounding back into the form that we saw him in last year. A solid bench across the board as the season's gone on. Deontay Foreman, Brian Robinson, as part of the some trades and stuff today, we have Adam Thielen, Mecole Hardman, Robert Tonyan, maybe even Devin Duvernay, all capable of filling in on a bye week or for an injury. A very solid bench from top to bottom. Now, no first-round picks until 2025, but don't forget, Ryne gets Javonte Williams back next year, which becomes a 3-headed monster with Kamara, Cook, and Javonte. That's a lot of value right there. However, as with Brad, this team has benefited from the 3rd lowest points against and is one of only, along with Brad, one of only 3 teams with fewer than 1,000 points scored against them. It was a benefit to him early in the season, with a few wins where he only got just under 100 points, but didn't really pop up again in a big way until this past week when he won despite scoring 84 points. But as we're going to keep finding these top ones, the positives far outweigh those negatives, and I think Ryne, as it sits right now, a game up in his division, very strong-looking roster heading into the postseason. And now, for the moment we're waiting for, okay? Because everyone, when you look at the power rankings, not only do you want to know where your team is, you want to know who's at the top. You want to know who's sitting up there looking down on everybody else for whatever reason for where they're sitting. Moment people have been waiting for. And while some people in the Mosley house may not be happy with the committee, this choice with Caleb at number 2 came down to 2 things. As he sits at 8-1 on the season, moving down 1 spot from before. It comes down to 2 things. 1, a bit of a difference in scoring consistency, which we'll get to in a little bit. And 2, a dramatic difference in points against, with Caleb's opponents scoring around 31 fewer points per game against him than myself, which has benefited him in multiple weeks. Caleb's lowest totals of the season coming against teams who have scored 102, 103, and 77 in those weeks. But that's about the only negative to say. Those are only points to say why he's not number 1, because there are far more reasons to say why this team is as high as number 2. Caleb has rattled off 8 consecutive wins after losing his only game of the season to me. Elite production from the quarterback position with Mahomes, a great summer trade for him earlier this year. DeAndre Swift has faded, mostly due to injury, but the opportunities will come back. ETN is feasting this year in Jacksonville, and now has a stranglehold on that backfield job with James Robinson out of Jacksonville. Elite, beyond upper echelon receiver production, with receiver 4 and receiver 5 on his roster. Like I said earlier, it seems like we have so many rosters where it's clusters of receivers, but Jefferson and Waddle, both on the same roster, Caleb couldn't be happier. Caleb could not be happier with what he's getting out of his receivers. The only downside right now is the loss of Mark Andrews to a little bit of an injury, and then now the bye week, so a couple weeks of missing his production. But that's, from what we can tell, that's not a long-term thing, so that should, kind of rectify itself pretty quickly. Chris Godwin is as good of a wide receiver 3/flex as you will find in this league, with 6 straight games for him in double digits after starting the year injured. A good problem to have with a second top-tier fantasy quarterback on his roster in Tua, which I think And I don't know what kind of stuff Caleb is shopping out there, but could perhaps be some trade bait at the deadline to have, another elite fantasy producer. I was talking with the wife about earlier. I have teams that I'm thinking of right now that could really use a Tua at quarterback, but we'll see. However, we are starting to see the same things on the bench that we saw in the first power rankings. Still a weirdly deep tight end room on Caleb's roster. Behind Andrews, he's still got Njoku. Now has Evan Ingram and Greg Dulcich, who's has several good games in a row. But not a lot of else that has panned out well on this bench, which also, as we'll see later, is the case with my roster. And we're seeing, a lot of swings at running back depth that are kind of not great options in case you have an injury. The only other healthy receiver on the roster outside of his taxi squad is Cortland Sutton. I do like the Hollywood Brown trade once he gets healthy. That could be big coming down the stretch when he comes back off of his injury. But a whole bench of running backs who have not really been what you would hope. So Caleb is in a similar situation to me of absolutely loaded starting lineup. But if you have a big injury, it may be a little tougher to kind of overcome that depending on when that injury hits. So here is the kicker too. Caleb's fate is entirely in his own hands at this point. If he wins out, he's the number 1 seed. And remember, the top 2 seeds get a bye in the first round, just as it happened last year. And this team is fully capable of going punch for punch with any team in the postseason. Any team, even like Caleb is capable of winning these games even when he's not at his best. When, a guy doesn't perform or 2 guys don't perform because there's just talent at every spot. However, since nobody seems to want to beat Caleb even when he's on a down week, we know this, looking ahead, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, as this is probably going to wind up going longer than I expected. The battle for the division, unless something shakes out weird, is going to come down to week 12, when Caleb and I play each other once again. If he wins, then he has a 2-game lead on me most likely and walks into the playoffs with one of the top 2 seeds. But if I win and we have the same record, then I have the tiebreaker by virtue of head-to-head. So we'll see. And we're going to get more into a little bit of the playoff matchups in just a minute. So Caleb's sitting there at number 2. And number 1! I understand. Now I hear everything. I hear everyone talking to your phone or to your monitor or to your, if you have you're streaming it to your TV. I can hear it. But you're going to have to take it up with the committee, all right? Look them up. They're in the book. Look for committee, the. I don't make the rules. But the rules are there for a reason. And as I said the first time around, not all wins and losses are created equal. Outside of my one low game of the year, which was 117 in week 3, which would be a great game for some of the teams that we have earlier in the power rankings. Other than that, this team, Nick's team, has scored over 145 points in every single other game. In ripping off 6 straight wins, I've notched 3 games over 150, including a game of 181 in week 2, which was the second highest game in our league's history. So why do you not have the best record then, Nick? Huh? Why do you not have it? Well, I'll tell you, strange, weird, French, also slightly German individual, because not all wins and losses are the same. They're just not, okay? Those are the rules. As I said before, my opponents score, on average, 31 more points per game against me than they do against Caleb. As Steven and I are separated by only 0.02 points for the most points scored against us. Most teams would buckle under such pressure, but I say nay. Nay. Bring the pressure, for it makes the diamonds that Joe Burrow will surely use in another fantastic jewelry decision later on this year. Look forward to it. A quick look will tell you all you need to know. This roster has quarterback 5, running back 1, 2, and 5, wide receiver 2, another top 5 receiver in Chase. Pardon me, let me close my tab, Googling how to donate a hip. Tight end 1, and even weirdly, Kicker 4. Thank you, Ryan Suckup. While my bench is definitely a bit barren, a deadline deal between my lovely wife and I for Rondale Moore helps the cause, and Jacoby Myers has been a true delight for me. On the rare occasion that I have had to ask him to fill in, he has done just wonderfully. I have loved that man. Elijah Moore is still, I believe, an interesting dynasty asset because, as we heard, I think yesterday, he's getting moved to the slot for the Jets. So either he takes Wall to his new position, he eventually gets his wish, and he gets the trade that he wants to some other team. But regardless, he already showed last year, if given the chance, that man can explode on the perimeter. I still have faith in his talent, and I think he's a very interesting dynasty asset. But the issues on my roster, few as they may be, or if it's a bench issue, will only be fixed via trade most likely. As over the next 3 years, I only have a total of 4 picks, and only 1 first rounder, which is in 2025. Only 1 pick in each of the next 2 drafts. But the nice thing, my roster is not only loaded, it is also fairly young. And as the great philosopher Les Snead once said, F them picks, who needs them? So that is our second quarter power rankings. As I was saying to people earlier in the week, it's probably going to wind up in future years turning into a every third of the season. We'll do a preseason power rankings in future years, and then after we'll do it every 5 games because it doesn't make sense to do a power rankings after the season ends. So that's how we'll do it moving forward. So to sum up your records, 8-1, Caleb, Nick and Ryne. That's me and Ryne. Your lovely guy sitting here. 7-2, 6-3. We got Brad and Michael. 5-4 is Jake. 4-5 is CJ. 3-6, Sunshine and Sarhea. 2-7, Corey and Colton. And 1-8, Steven. We have a distribution at almost every place, but no one undefeated and no one who's lost every game. So there's a lot going on here in the league. Current playoff seeds, here, I'm going to do this so that it'll make me think that this is the playoff time, so when I look at the thumbnails later for timestamps. Current playoff seeds. Caleb is the number 1 seed as it currently stands. Now, the way that our playoffs work, it is the 3 division winners, and then it's like the NFL, and then by best record after that. So by virtue of division winners, number 2 seed right now is Ryne. Number 3, even at 5-4, is Jake, because he is winning that division that no one would like to take from him. I am the 4 seed. Michael is the number 5 seed, and Brad is sneaking in with the last playoff spot right now as the 6th seed. Big weeks coming ahead. This coming week, I play Ryne, who is leading that division 1 game ahead of Brad, and Brad plays Caleb. If Brad and I could each win, it makes a very interesting situation at the top of both divisions. And then in week 12, those 4 teams all involved again, where I play Caleb, potentially for the division, and Brad plays Ryne, also in week 12, potentially for the division. I wanted to look ahead for big weeks in which one is it? In the Johto division, but as it turns out, Jake's 2 games ahead, and no one else in that division would like to challenge him for that, so they don't really have a lot of big weeks. We had 7 trades, I believe, in this window. Caleb and Michael with a Mostert for Goff sort of swap. The big kahuna between Corey and CJ, which I'm not going to totally recap. You guys remember that. Caleb and CJ had a Mostert and AJ Dillon trade. And then a bunch today. Rondale Moore for Isaiah Likely between me and Sarhea. Colton and Brad with the Gabe Davis for Cordero Patterson. Caleb added Marquise Brown, with Sunshine adding Michael Gallup, some picks involved. Steven getting 2 picks, including a first rounder, while Ryne gets Dalvin Cook. And then Corey adding Antonio Gibson, while Ryne gets Adam Thielen and McCole Hardman. I love, again, the deals from both of the teams in the Kanto division. Ryne and Brad making a running back move to make a playoff push. Love both of those. Stud of the quarter as we get into 2 superlatives. I would pick myself with 145 plus points in every game of this quarter, but the committee has told me that that is frowned upon. So I have a tie. Caleb with wins in all 5 games and still trying to be active in the trade market, and Ryne, who almost set the new season high in total points in a season in week 8, just about a 1.5 short, and going 4-1 in that stretch with a big running back move at the deadline. My studs of the quarter. The dud of the quarter, really only one option. Have the committee having heard the words from his own mouth, the tanking Stephen Myers, sadly, of the London Gentleman franchise, must be granted dud of the quarter with 5 losses and only 1 game over 100 points. Here's to playing for the future. Highest point total of this segment of the season, myself in week 5, 181, with Ryne just behind with the 179-point game. The lowest game, sadly also, Steven, 56 points in week 9. And the highest score by one individual player in that window, Joe Mixon, just this last week with 55.1 points against Carolina for the almighty Overlord. Woo! Let's go. All right, guys, we are sitting at 50 minutes. I'm terribly sorry that went as long as it did. I swear, if I look and there's some sort of recording issue, I will set all of this ablaze. So, yeah. Well, hopefully, yeah. Hopefully I don't have to rent this place out again because everyone keeps using it for weird press conferences. But, all right, I will check you guys out again pretty soon. We will do one more power ranking this season after the final regular season game. Going into the postseason, it will be our pre-playoffs power rankings. All right, and then we'll get into all the postseason stuff heading after that. But as we're getting closer to it, you still got a couple more days for the trade deadline. If you got keep checking the app, see if you have offers out to you. If you see a need on your team, if you got picks you're willing to kind of shop around, or if you're down at the bottom of the league and you're like, you know what, it's time to sell off, time to get future assets. Look around. Find ways to improve either for now or for in the future. So, good talking to you guys. I'm not sorry. I'm never sorry about all the jabs to Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, I will chat with you guys soon. Here's hoping for more spicy trade deadline action.